thank you all again for being here. I wanted to take just a couple minutes to tell you about New America. I've spoken to a couple of you last night and previously and this morning about what is this place that we're at. You're not alone in not necessarily understanding who we are and what we do. So I want to take a couple minutes and let you know a little bit about the organization and how we all fit together. I'll start first by saying that our president, Paul Butler, was supposed to be here, and he wanted to be here, and welcome you all. He's been with us since early 2021, so not that long, and this would have been his first chance to be in person with a group of folks since he came on during the pandemic when we were closed. He can't be here, unfortunately, so he sends his regrets. He has a COVID at home, so he's okay, but he's managing that, so he's not here. But wanted definitely to pass on his regrets, and he's sorry that he can't be here. Our CEO, who sits side by side with Paul, they work together to lead the organization, is Anne-Marie Slaughter. She's been here for, maybe eight years or so, yeah? She would be thrilled to be here as well. She also can't be here, in part to just welcome you all, but also in part because among the many, many things that Anne-Marie is, she's also a network theorist, and so she has written about and studied networks. So she's particularly interested in these kinds of networks that we've been forming here at New America. So to back up again to what is New America and who are we? We were formed in 1999 as a fellows program. So we're relatively young as an organization. We're also relatively heterodox or unique in many ways. We are a DC-based think tank, so we do a lot of DC-based think tank kind of things. We do research and we do policy analysis and we do writing and communications. But we're more than that. We very much are committed to connecting with communities across the country. That's not an easy thing to do when you're DC-based. So we have folks that work in other parts of the countries, but we also look to opportunities like this, where we're able to connect with people that are living in communities across the country and learn from them and connect you all together. We have a number of programs across New America, a dozen or more. So what started as just a fellows program, which exists still. So let me pause for a moment and say our fellows program is quite phenomenal. If you have a chance to go to our website and look at our fellows, over the years and still, they're a really impressive, amazing collection of people. They do all sorts of different writing. Some of them do film, that's why I'm pausing a little bit, but many of them have written books over the years. When you walk in and you walk past that big display of books, almost all of the books there have been written by our fellows. Some also from our staff as well, but it's a very impressive display of amazing work. So we're very proud of our fellows program, and that was the origin of New America. But since that time, we've grown into many programs. The education policy program, where we sit, is the biggest program that we have in New America, but we have, as I said, a dozen or more programs in housing, in family and economic security. We have programs even in international security that aren't necessarily dovetailing with our education work as much, but are really quite fascinating and make it a dynamic and really interesting place to be. So if you go to our website and you're just sort of looking around New America, you'll see all sorts of things that we're doing, and that is a good demonstration or a display of how diverse our work is. We are, as I said then, writers. We have our fellows that spend time writing. We have a grand communications team, many of whom are here, but also it's part of the DNA of New America. We want to make sure that we get good ideas and we get them out. We translate research to policymakers and to the public. We want folks to know what works, like what do we know about whatever issue it is, and we want to get it to the folks that are decision makers, or in the case of the public, just are really stakeholders. About the network and how you all fit in, I want to pause for a second and say that our work, part of what makes our work different is that I've worked in many organizations where we've had to find out, national organizations, where we've had to find out like what's happening in the field, and they send you out, go find out what's happening in the field. And I was trained as a qualitative researcher, and so I would do that. I would go out and I would mine information from people, and I mean, Anne's back there, I know, and Anne's been doing this, like we have to do that. We have to ask questions, and we have to do it in a systematic way. But getting information from people and then looking at it and then translating it, analyzing it, translating, doesn't really do enough. It really doesn't do justice to what folks are doing. It takes it and it sort of translates something that still is coming through someone like myself. The power of a network really is that we want to be able to make sure that you all are strengthening your programs by talking to one another. I don't know about GYO. I don't run a GYO program. I can tell you what the research says, mostly through Amaya, but I can't say that I really am an expert in it. And so it's really important that the expertise, and this is my main point, comes from the field. And there's different ways of doing that, but it's not just by going out, trying to find it, and bringing it back, and giving it to people. And we have to do this kind of work. It takes more time. It takes more effort from you all, from us, to do this kind of work, but it's really, really important to figure out what works so that we can improve our education system and really our society. That's what New America is about. We're trying to improve this country and realize really what it can be, because it's failed in many ways. But we also, in our education program, are very, very focused on strengthening our public education system, from early education all the way through higher education and the workforce. So there's probably 100 or so people that work at New America here and live in other places as well. And about 35, I'm looking at my ed people, folks, thanks Riker, in the ed program. And we focus on issues from early care, like birth, all the way through up to workforce and labor. It's a big span, and that's intentional, because we want to make sure that we can see those transition points and those gaps that oftentimes in an otherwise arbitrarily designed, chunked out system, you miss. There's no reason, for example, that high school would be like a 4-year, just 4 years, that's made up, and for a longer conversation. But the point here is that those points along the way of a trajectory of learning from birth all the way through your life are what we're trying to connect, so that we can make sure that we have a system that serves the students and the families who really have not been served historically well and still aren't. So that's what we're committed to. That's what we believe. If you have a chance and you see, well, you'll see it when you got breakfast, maybe when you get lunch. But there are posters, I guess they're called. What are they called? Pictures, framed statements that are on the wall over there or sitting up against the wall that will give you a sense of our work across New America. If you were upstairs last night or if you go up today, on the wall there's a social compact that also describes just our values and our beliefs. I'll stop by saying that we are a diaspora of people. There's a lot of people that have come through New America as staff, as fellows, and now as network members. So you're in it now. You're part of it now. And so we welcome you to this building, for one, which is not entirely our building. We are 9, 10, and 11. Somebody asked me this, so I'm going to tell you. This was initially the American Bar Association building. They're not here anymore, but it was. If you go outside, you'll see it etched up on the wall or on the building. In any event, we are very pleased to have you here. We want to welcome you not just as guests, but as part of our community. We're all about building your community so that you can strengthen and improve all of what's happening where you live, but also we want to make sure that that happens for the whole country. So we're committed to that and happy to be here.
Okay, so I'm actually gonna invite up Amaya Garcia and our colleague Jasmine Owens, and while y'all come up, I'm gonna give their bios really quickly. And another housekeeping thing for people who are presenting today, there's a clicker up here, which is how I'm handling these slides. So when you get up here, you'll have the power in your hands too. It feels good. So. We know Amaya, but I'll also give her the formal bio. Amaya is our Deputy Director of Pre-K through 12 Education here at New America. And like Elena suggested, she provides the research and analysis on policies and programs related to GYO and to English learners. And she leads and supports this Grow Your Own network. Prior to joining New America, Amaya was a policy analyst at the DC State Board of Education, and she was a research associate at the American Institutes of Research. She holds a master's in public policy from the University of Maryland, College Park, a master's in cognitive studies in education from Teachers College, Columbia, and a bachelor's in English and psychology from the University of Iowa. And then she'll be presenting with Jasmine Owens, who is a policy advisor for the Pre-K through 12 team here at New America. She joins the team after managing both the education and health policy portfolios at the National Urban League, where she had the opportunity to serve a large affiliate network by supporting direct service work with federal advocacy. She's a former teacher, and she approaches education policy issues with an eye toward how they impact real classrooms, students, teachers, and families. Jasmine holds a master's in sociology and education with a policy concentration from Teachers College Columbia, and a bachelor's in English with a secondary education concentration from Spelman College. Amaya and Jasmine, welcome to the stage.
Okay. Did you take the clicker? Oh, no. I stole it. Okay. It's all right. Okay. So yeah, welcome everyone. We're going to give some policy overviews. I'm going to give a state-focused policy overview, and Jasmine's going to talk about federal policy. But before we begin, I just want to show everyone the map that documents our network and where you all are coming from. And so just so you can see the visual representation of who we all are. We probably should have a map pin on DC too, since we lead it out of here. And just a little bit about our team. I don't know how many of you know kind of all the work that we've done on Grow Your Own over the years, but we initially started looking at Grow Your Own through the lens of bilingual educators, and that grew out of our work on English learners and going to many, many dual language classrooms and seeing that there was a lot of paraeducators who had the skills and competencies to be teachers but faced barriers to reach that goal. And so Grow Your Own kind of grew up as a solution out of that. So I've been very lucky to get to go and visit many programs, including some who are in this room today, to learn about their models and approaches. Did the 50-state policy and program scan. We've done papers on state competitive grant programs. We've tried to come up with essential policies and practices. And so these are just some of the visual representations of the work that we have done. And we started doing this work in 2016, I would say. And what we're doing next, our next big project actually is the GYO Toolkit, which will come this fall in a collection of research policy and practice resources. And we're going to try to make it sort of a high-level overview to supplement people's work, but also because of the fact that there's so much interest in Grow Your Own, to have people just have a sort of starting point, baseline understanding of what it means to run and design these programs. So now on to the presentation. We are going to show this quick video, explainer video that our comms team, that Fabio made, just to kind of set the stage for what we mean when we talk about Grow Your Own and to kind of look at what's happening across the country, I guess. Put the volume. I don't know if you can. It's very low.
Just outside Seattle, Highline Public Schools is developing bilingual teachers from the ground up. In Chicago, the public school district has launched multiple programs to grow the ranks of its teacher workforce. And in Mississippi, rural school districts are helping community members gain a foothold in the teaching profession. These programs share the goal of developing teachers from the community for the community. Known as Grow Your Own, or GYO, this strategy is designed to address multiple challenges, including persistent teacher shortages, a linguistic and racial mismatch between teachers and students, and the misalignment between teacher preparation and local needs. GYO programs are partnerships between school districts, teacher preparation programs, and/or community-based organizations that recruit and prepare local community members to enter the teaching profession and teach in their communities.
GYO is a powerful strategy because it amplifies the assets of community and seeks to leverage those assets to benefit students in local school systems. This emphasis on who to recruit is really a critical component of GYO programs.
This means GYO programs propel paraeducators who support the education of our most vulnerable students to the head of the classroom. Seek out high school students with the goal of bringing them back to their home districts to teach. Empower parents to pursue degrees in teaching to give back to their local schools and communities. And focus on non-traditional candidates who work full-time or students who are entering college for the first time. GYO programs often offer financial assistance, paid job-embedded learning, academic advising, flexible scheduling for courses, mentorship, tutoring, test preparation, and a cohort model. GYO can be supported in various ways. For starters, policymakers can expand access to community-based teacher preparation programs, and philanthropic groups can financially support local teacher pathways. Higher education institutions can develop strong partnerships with local school districts who can invest in developing local teachers themselves. But most importantly, everyone can champion GYO as a community-based strategy to improve public education.
Okay. The reason that we decided to come up with a definition is because when we've done research on Grow Your Own, there really isn't one, right? Like people think about it in different ways, and so we basically figured if we were going to do a whole body of work on this, we needed to define what we mean. And so for us, the heart of this definition is really in the partnerships, because we think that's a really essential component of GYO, making sure that they're co-created and co-led by EPPs and school districts and their community organizations. And then, of course, the local part of it, right? We really want them to be focused on people who are in the community and who are dedicated to staying and teaching in their local communities. We think that that's, those are those core elements that we should focus on when we think about Grow Your Own. And then with the help of actually some of the people in this room, a few years ago, we also decided to kind of look at what the research says, look at people's experiences, and think about what are these essential elements of GYO. And these are things that we have shared with policymakers when they ask us questions about bills that they might be considering or anything related to Grow Your Own. We try to share this so that way when they think about the legislation that they're crafting, they're making sure that these kinds of elements are embedded. So obviously strong partnerships, as I mentioned, community-based recruitment, wraparound supports, which is really, really important for kind of all levels of Grow Your Own, paid work-based experiences, and I think a lot of that comes out of the fact that New America does do a lot of work on workforce development, and we look at different models of preparation, and we think that it's really important that, if you're going to be working under the guidance of a mentor teacher, or you're going to be working in a school, learning how to be a teacher, you should be paid for that experience. And then lastly, structured pathways for teacher candidates to earn their credentials and certification. And that really came out of focus groups that we did with multilingual paraprofessionals with Ann Duffett's help many years ago. And that was one of the things that they talked about, is they're like, I want to become a teacher, but I'm not sure how. So, and then it's going to take too long, right? And so the good thing about Grow Your Own programs is that they can be structured in a way that they actually know what their timeline is to earning a degree, instead of trying to do it on their own and taking 6-8 years, however long it's going to take. So I want to just acknowledge that GYO is having a moment right now. It grew out of grassroots movements in the Logan Square neighborhood, like this later iteration of GYO. Like, GYO has been around for a while, but I kind of think of that as like the modern movement in GYO. And now it's risen to a strategy that's included in presidential proposals. So it was included in Build Back Better. It was named. It had a funding line for it. And so I think that's a pretty significant win and significant signal that people are embracing this strategy and thinking it's an important tool for building the teacher pipeline. But even before these changes, we saw an increase in GYO programs at the state and local level. And so because of these trends, we decided to conduct a 50-state scan to identify programs, including the candidates that programs are serving, the types of programs that are offered and how they're designed, and the policies that support GYO program development, implementation, and sustainability. So we started the research in the summer of 2018. We basically relied on Google searches and looking at every single state and trying to figure out, okay, what do they have for Grow Your Own? And we looked at programs that target high school students, paras, non-certified school staff, and community members. We only looked at programs that were geared toward local candidates. So like, for example, we didn't look like at undergraduate programs that were trying to get undergraduate kids to like teach in their communities. That was sort of outside of the scope of what we looked at. And we tried to capture a broad range of programs such as like career and technical education, alternative certification, career ladders, and those that are more limited in scope like scholarships. We also partnered with FDR Group again to survey state Title II and Title III directors to kind of learn about the work they were doing on GYO, and those findings kind of supplemented the information that we found in our independent review. We first published the paper in 2020, but I recently updated it. I just updated it in May, actually, because there's been so much activity around Grow Your Own. I wanted to make sure that it was reflective of all these developments that have gone on. And so the paper is online, but the findings are presented like this is the data, and so this is just an example of what it looks like. And you have the state, and then you have like whether they have a policy, do they have any funding, are there programs for high school students, what kind, are there programs for pairs, what kind, are there programs for bilingual educators, and again, like what kind. And so we define programs in lots of different ways. So for high school students, it could be dual enrollment, Educators Rising, which I'm sure many of you have heard of, teacher cadet, future teacher clubs, etc. For para-educators, it could just be scholarships. It could be partnership programs that are like kind of fit with how we define GYO. Career ladders that basically just like give, are district-based and give paras kind of that step up, et cetera. And so we have that for all 50 states if you look at the paper. And we had 5 major findings. So first is that localities use the term GYO in different ways to address common problems, and that shouldn't be really a surprise, right, because of the fact that it's such a localized strategy. But even though people define it differently, overall it's being used as a tool for solving teacher shortage areas and for increasing the diversity of the teacher workforce. As of now, only one state, which is Wyoming, does not have some type of GYO program. In 47 states and DC, we found some kinds of programs for high school students. And the number of programs vary widely. So 7 states have like more than one type of program, and 9 states have more than 5 types of programs. So some states have really embraced this wholeheartedly, and some are kind of taking smaller steps. A lot of programs are initiated at the district level, but a growing number are supported by state investments or have an opportunity to pursue state funding, and that's a finding that I'll talk about in just a little bit. But there's a lot of variation across program design, reliance on partnerships, and the amount and types of support offered to candidates. So again, highly local, defined in different ways, common problems, but people use a lot of different design models to kind of try to meet their goals. More than half the states have a policy, but funding is variable. So 29 states and DC have a policy which we define as a statute, bill, or executive order. And again, these policies can vary from scholarships designed to help high school graduates cover the cost of educator prep, alternative route programs, prepare educators, things like that. A slightly higher number, 31 states and DC, fund some type of GYO program. And of these, 10 plus DC fund a competitive grant program. So when I did this scan in 2020, it was actually only 19 states that had any kind of funding, and now we're up to 31. And I attribute that change to federal recovery funds is one thing I think is a big component of this. A lot of states and districts are capitalizing on those investments to really try to address the strategy of the teacher pipeline. But the one issue with that then, it goes to sustainability. Some of these are one-time investments that are being made, and so I guess the question is how this will change. Like in 2 years from now, the number could be lower again, I'm not really sure. But I think, right now is really, like I said, GYO is having a moment, and it's a good time to kind of capitalize on the momentum. Pathways for high school students are the most common type of GYO program, and to be honest, here in DC, we get a lot of interest from federal policymakers on high school programs and trying to develop legislation to support those models. Many of them are offered through career and technical education. Dual enrollment is another really popular approach, but I think we have very limited research on the efficacy of high school models and their long-term impact, and so I think for us, we like to keep a cautious eye on how they're growing and changing. But high school students are seen as an attractive pool of potential teachers who would want to return to their home communities. And so we'll see kind of how that progresses, I guess, over time. Paraeducator pathways are also very popular, so they're offered in 39 states and DC, with many housed at the district level. And as I think all of you know, that lots of paraeducators are tapped by their building administrator to enroll in a program due to, them thinking that they would be an excellent teacher and could help their school. And paraeducators are more likely to match the racial and linguistic diversity of the K-12 student population. So they're we call them like an untapped pool of potential teacher talent. And paraeducator programs are also designed in kind of a lot of different ways. So like New Mexico, for example, they have a paraeducator GYO program, but it's really just a scholarship program, and the money actually goes to the IHE, and then the IHE is the one who awards the funds. But then you have Minnesota, which uses a different strategy, right, where the school district gets the money, and then they partner with the IHE, and that's kind of how it works. Scholarship programs, are pretty popular, and they likely have a wider reach, but to us, they're not the most efficient strategy because they don't kind of go with those elements we talked about in terms of the other kinds of supports that candidates need. But overall, more research is needed to examine the outcomes of different types of GYO programs, including their cost and return on investment, because that is a question we also get a lot, is how much does a GYO program cost? And so I think that there's a lot of opportunity to produce new and engaging research on GYO to really help build the field's understanding and help continue the momentum going forward. So that is my presentation. This is the link to the report. You will get all these slides, and then just our webpage on GYO that showcases all of our work. And now I'm going to pass it off to Jasmine.
How about now? There we go. Okay. Right. So we are going to get started with this. Can you hear me now? Oh, okay. There we go. The federal policy overview. Hi, I'm Jasmine. It's nice to meet you all. This is my first time getting to talk to this group in particular, so I'm very, very excited about discussing federal teacher prep policy. All right, hold on. I'm gonna get my timer so I can make sure I'm not talking too much. All right, let's do this. So we're gonna start with big legislation. These are pieces of legislation that get reauthorized usually every 10 years or so. It's been a lot longer for some of these pieces. So that is the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, the Higher Education Act, and I'm going to jump all the way down to Special Education Personnel Preparation that is authorized under IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act. Teacher Quality Partnership Grants, Teach Grants, and the Augustus F. Hawkins Centers all fall under the Higher Education Act. So it's basically three big pieces that we'll be discussing: ESEA, HEA, and IDEA. Okay, if I say any acronyms that you guys need me to spell out, please just stop me so that I can do that, okay? All right, so the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965. Most of us know the, was it 2001 reauthorization, No Child Left Behind? That was a huge deal. Nobody really liked it. But the most recent reauthorization is the Every Student Succeeds Act, which was reauthorized in 2015 by President Obama. Title II of the ESEA focuses on educator development and quality. So I have pulled out some screenshots of the bill text, which I'm going to share with you in the next few slides. It's going to be very, very tiny because it's a very long bill, but I'm going to talk about what each of those parts mean. And yeah, okay. So ESEA is mostly known for its professional development opportunities. However, there are some allowable uses that could be of interest that could be used for GYO purposes. So the top example that I pulled out, there's money set aside to support the alternative certification routes for new teachers, especially in high-need areas. So, sorry, I'm losing my place. You'll notice that under Roman numeral 3, I'm gonna just pop over here so y'all can see it. When you guys get these slides, you'll see paraprofessionals are called out very specifically in this example. And the example under that, this is where states can support district efforts to promote professional growth and emphasize multiple career paths. And this is specifically based on onboarding new teachers and school leaders. I will say that New America's team spends a lot of time looking at bill text like this. We have member offices that reach out to us to talk about some of these things. This is not something that I would imagine you all need to just dig through for opportunities, but it would be good for you to know that these opportunities exist at the state and district level should you want to tap into them, okay? Next, allowable uses at the district level. So the example I pulled out here is where funds can be used to recruit and retain educators, especially in high-need areas, via multiple pathways. And then under that is a competitive grant opportunity that supports educators from non-traditional backgrounds and alternative certification routes. So that is the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. There's a lot in there. It is a huge bill. There are a lot of conversations about when it gets reauthorized, what that might look like. We're hoping that when it does get reauthorized, we continue to strengthen Title II so that our students get the most prepared teachers that they can. But this is only one of the options in terms of federal legislation that is a lever for improving the teacher education and preparation pathways. I'm missing something, okay. Next, higher education. So this was developed in 1965, but the most comprehensive recent reauthorization was in 2008. It authorized federal student aid, student loans, Pell Grants, and institutional aid. That's aid that goes directly to institutions of higher education or IHEs. So like I said, last reauthorization was in 2008, and it is way, way overdue for an overhaul. However, every time congressional members start talking about that, negotiations fall apart, and that is why we're here so many years later without another reauthorization. So Title II of HEA also manages teacher quality and teacher preparation. HEA Title II is not the same as ESEA Title II, but they both manage teachers, okay? So let's just dig right into the teacher quality partnership grants. Okay, so these are partnerships between institutions of higher education and local education agencies and schools, or districts and schools. For a while, it was one of the only federal initiatives designed to strengthen educator prep at the institutional level. We're going to talk a little bit more about the Augustus F. Hawkins Centers for Excellence that got funding this past year. So now it's not the only program at institutions. But in the program, grantees provide teacher candidates with year-long clinical experiences, induction programs, teaching residencies, and the candidates then commit to teaching for at least 3 years in a high-need field in a high-need district. Next, teach grants. Teach grants get a very, very bad reputation, and with very good reason. It is authorized through the Higher Education Act, as I mentioned, but they are grants that are offered to up to $16,000 for undergraduate students and up to $8,000 for graduate students. And it is a commitment to teaching in a high-need field in a high-need district, but if the candidate does not meet the requirements, it converts to a loan, which is not a great thing, because what we want to do is not saddle teachers with more student debt, right? We want them to come into the classroom without that burden. So we think that because it's not such a viable option for college freshmen, it might be a more viable option for people who are already in the field, who are already committed to teaching, and who know that they want to be in the classroom. So for that reason, teach grants might be a more viable option for paraprofessionals, for people who are in their mid-career changes, but particularly of interest to this group because of GYO. Next, the Augustus F. Hawkins Centers of Excellence. So these were established, this center was established in the 2008 reauthorization of the Higher Education Act, but it did not receive funding until last year. FY22 was the first time that it has received any appropriations funding since it was developed. So basically, it's a competitive grant opportunity where money goes to HBCUs, historically black colleges and universities, TCUs, tribal colleges and universities, and MSIs, minority serving institutions. And the funding can be used to provide clinical experiences and for financial aid for teacher preparation programs. Funding has not yet been sent to institutions, but it was funded at $8 million in the last appropriations bill. There are currently efforts to increase funding for FY23 to $40 million. So although institutions have not yet received those funds, this is a really great step in the right direction for providing really good clinical experiences and resources to institutions to then provide those experiences. Last big piece that we're going to talk about is the Special Education Personnel Preparation Program. This is authorized through IDEA. They provide competitive grants to for research-based training and professional development opportunities, in addition to grants that go to institutions to support training for special education personnel. So we're thinking specifically about students with disabilities and making sure that their teachers are prepared to teach them in the way that they need. Okay, hold on, sorry, I'm checking the time. Okay, I'm gonna have to speed up, I'm sorry. Major shifts in federal policy. So the COVID-19 pandemic, it goes without saying, that really changed everything in the last few years. It shifted a lot in public education. The challenges that have been presented really underscored the needs of the students that existed before the pandemic, but the pandemic really did create a sense of urgency that hadn't been there before. We believe that to truly meet the needs of students, we need to ensure that educators are as prepared to teach them as they can be. So with that being said, we also know that there has been so much more money flowing into public education now than in recent years. COVID relief funds have flowed trillions of dollars into classrooms. So as a result, I'm skipping down to now alignment with workforce. We're starting to have conversations about educators as workers, excuse me. Educators, we're always workers. They've always been employees, but now we're starting to see alignment with workforce. And thinking about how some of those COVID relief funds can be used to start having the conversations that include teachers in the apprenticeship conversation, that include teachers in the alignment of the rest of the workforce that the U.S. experiences. And then finally, as Amaya mentioned, Grow Your Own was called out very specifically by the Biden administration in Build Back Better. We were hoping to see that Grow Your Own was going to be funded specifically in the reconciliation bill, but again, as negotiations typically do, I'm going to cough, cough, nudge, nudge at Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema. We lost that opportunity to fund GYO at that level. But it did start a conversation that has promoted a lot more resources. We're starting to see a lot more member offices talking about GYO. The next slide that I'm going to show you is going to have a few bills that included GYO that were called out specifically by some member offices. But the energy is there, which even though it wasn't funded in the way that we wanted to, that's a positive thing. Last but not least, I'm going to get out of your hair after this. There are 3 bills that I want to flag for you. 2 of them were never actually introduced, but the member offices reached out to us to get help to improve the bill and make them as good as it possibly could be. The first is Sprout, Sustainably Producing Renewable, Often Underrepresented Teachers Act. Sprout was introduced by Senator Brian Schatz of Hawaii. It provided funding for GYO at the pre-collegiate level, that's high school GYO. The office wanted it considered in the reconciliation bill, but since negotiations fell apart, they were not able to get it in the final bill. Educators for America was a bicameral effort, that is the House and Senate. So Senator Jack Reed of Rhode Island and Representative Alma Adams of North Carolina. Rather than a standalone bill like Sprout, Educators for America was an effort to revamp the entire HEA Title II in lieu of a full HEA reauthorization. So they introduced their bills in December 2020, but they didn't make it out of committee. But we thought it was a great bill to flag for you guys because it had a lot of really great resources in it. And last but not least, Teachers of Tomorrow. This is Representative Frederica Wilson from Florida. The bill was an attempt to address teacher shortages and teacher diversity by funding Grow Your Own very specifically, but is another one that didn't yet get introduced. So like the rest of these, we're really excited to see this energy being put behind addressing teacher shortages and teacher diversity issues via Grow Your Own efforts and via Grow Your Own programs at the federal level. But we'll see what happens next. And that is it for me. I'm out of here. Thank you very much.